Welcome back to the Pivot Table. This is real talk for leaders and professionals who are ready to realign, reimagine, or redefine what success means right now. I'm Rhovine. I'm the host, and I'm also a consulting psychologist. And with me are Makesha Spence and Alma Brew. Today, we're going to be talking through how to reinvent without starting over. And we're actually going to be sharing our own personal stories. I'd like to kick us off.
I can start. I have a really joyful story of a pivot. It didn't start that way, but I would say that when I look back, I think about how so many things came together to help me recognize that I was essentially unhappy and that I needed to find a way forward that brought me that sense of purpose and meaning in my life. What came to mind when Amma mentioned a while back that sometimes we've actually chosen the right career path and we have invested years in doing work that is meaningful and impactful, but then we, having evolved, having changed over time, that particular career no longer brings us that sense of joy. And that I can definitely relate to that. I started my journey as an educator. So imagine me, 20 plus, working in a university, starting out as a lecturer in psychology. And I was working in a university that was focused on serving people who would not have otherwise had the opportunity to study higher education level. And that in itself was very meaningful to me because I could immediately see the impact of the work I was doing. The people in my classes were often persons who were not particularly wealthy. They had opportunities to pay flexibly and to continue working, look after their families. And so that was really meaningful to me because we were opening doors for people who just would not have had those opportunities otherwise. And that work was just really special. I think after 20 years of doing that work, as much as I loved it, I felt like I needed to do something else. I was working really long hours because that's what this type of work requires. So fast forward 20 years and I was the vice president for academic affairs and then acting president. And there was a lot coming at me. And the work itself was interesting, but I felt like I'm not enjoying it as much as I used to. And I feel like there needs to be a new season. I think the main thing I found myself doing was just putting my head down and barreling through it, working really long hours, checking boxes. And I recognized that I actually wanted more. I wanted family. I wanted time for hobbies that I loved. And I wanted to serve people in a different way. And so I started that journey of exploration. And the first thing I did was I started looking for internships that focused on consulting psychology because that was an area I had a particular interest in. And ultimately landed on an internship that exposed me more deeply to the field and concretized my interest in it. And so that was how I was able to pivot into full-time consulting work. And I haven't looked back. And the thing that is really special about the work that I do now is that I still get to train adults. I still get to do that education work, which energizes me, but I'm able to do other things. I do coaching, I do psychometric assessments, I help organizations find the best fit. There's never a dull moment. The projects are wide, they are varied, and that excites me as well. I never know what's going to come into the firm on a given day, and I love that. And so there's just so much more alignment between the work I'm doing now and how I had grown. And I just find it extremely fulfilling. And so I look back at the starting point and I'm really crystal clear that those 20 years in that university made a difference. Those years helped me grow and to transform and to evolve, to use Emma's word. But then I got to a point where I needed a change. And I went through that process of awakening, that process of searching and exploring, and then landed on this really beautiful space of alignment between the values that I have, doing meaningful work, impacting people. We like to say at DRI Consulting that we stand for love at work, success delivered. So, bringing out the truest and best in people and their organizations. And so, doing that day to day is definitely something that excites me. What's your story, Emma?
So I will say that I have done little tiny mini pivots that have brought me to where I am today because my career had its twists and turns. So I
Mhm.
started out knowing that I'm going to go into some kind of coaching or psychology career. So I did the first degree in psychology and then did the master's. And while I was in school, I did things like working in a call center, where it's a telephone call in France, I worked with a company called the RAC, which is kind of like AAA. So it's kind of like a lot of assistance to people in distress who were traveling all over Europe, who needed support. And it was a very high, intense job, but that's all part of my training of what has made me who I am today, right? And so moving to the US, doing my master's, and then starting my career in HR, but then needing to stop because I had my kids and my kids have special needs. So I had to break. But I didn't realize how much that experience of taking care of my kids and figuring out services and advocating for them and making phone calls and booking appointments and navigating their health journey was also training me to become a very organized and somebody who can juggle multiple projects.
Mm.
I know you always ask me that, how do you do it?
Yeah.
Because that experience has taught me how to do it. So all those things I feel are little pivots down the line in my life. And then finally getting to the point where my kids were stable and even at some point even starting a daycare business. I did all that. And then finally going like, hey, okay, now I'm ready to go back to the original plan of being a coach or working in HR or working in I was a human development. That's what it
Mm.
is, right? And then doing the incubator phase, getting a coach, figuring out, okay, I need to upskill, going back to school. I think that's where Makesha and I met, going back to
Mm-hmm.
coaching school, getting the certification with the ICF, starting my coaching business, and even at some point also pivoting and going like, hey, I think I need more experience because I'm certified on paper, but I
Mm.
don't have the confidence. So I need to align myself with an organization that has all the training I can get. And then now going into Lyra work, right? Working full time with Lyra for a couple of years. When I look back, I see that it's been tiny little pivots here and there, shifts here and there, moving things, different scenarios,
Mm.
but still getting training and experience and learning along the way. And
Yeah.
today, when I look back, I tell people I can coach you in my sleep. In my sleep, not because I'm being condescending, but it's because I have had all these experiences and all the training and all the schooling, going back to school, getting and working on the doctor and all that makes me I'm a boom,
Yeah. I
right?
love
So
that.
I always say that my pivot story is though like one thing and I pivoted into this, but it's been tiny little things. And one thing that I see as very important is being able to acknowledge it when it's
Mm.
time to make a tiny change.
Yeah.
Because I could have still be sitting at home being a stay-at-home mom, saying my kids have special needs, so I'm gonna do nothing. I'm just gonna be
Mm-hmm.
home and watch my kids. Or I could have still be just building a coaching business on my own and not getting training through working with Lyra Health, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or I could have just said, oh, how dare me try to even get a doctorate. So I
Mm.
went 2 years ago because when I said I was going to go back to school and get a doctorate and work on a doctorate, it was like, how dare you? How are
Yeah.
you going to do this? Like, you have kids, you have this. But I was like, no, I'm still going to do it. I'm going to take steps towards it. It's a big elephant, but I'm not expected to eat the elephant at once.
Right.
I can at least take it one term at a time. And if I need to take time off, I can take it off. I can take a
Yeah.
term. I didn't even have to. And it's been 2 years and I'm now in the dissertation phase. And so for me, pivoting has not been one big pivot, but it's
Mm-hmm.
been tiny little shifts to the left, to the right, to the left,
Yep.
step
Yeah.
backwards, move forward. It's been, and it's what has brought me here is acknowledging it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been being able to step back. When I feel that internal struggle, being able to step back and go like, something is not aligning, something just
Mm-hmm.
doesn't fit. Let me step back and figure out and reassess. And usually in doing that, I'm able to figure out even one little thing I need to move around to just
Mm.
help me to align, right? That would take me to the next best step for the big picture that I have. Because I have a huge vision. When I tell you my vision, you're going to tell me I'm delusioned. And I'm not there yet. I'm not even 10% through with it yet. But I feel like all these tiny little stops and bumps and decisions and cocoon faces. Because there have been times when I've cried. There have been times when I felt like I'm failing. And there have been times when I remember when I had my twins, I used to tell my mom, I think I'm not gonna do anything. I think I'm
Mm.
just gonna forget about being a career person and just focus on kids. And my mom would say, it's just a season. You gotta
Yes.
figure it
Yeah.
out, right? So being able to even overcome all that and still be here and still be working towards it and shifting the mindset from it doesn't have to be one and done. It's an ongoing growth journey of we're
Absolutely.
gonna move take tiny baby steps towards
Mm-hmm.
where we're trying to get to. I would say that is what my pivots have looked like, little baby steps. And we're still working on it. But at the end of the day, how am I giving myself the room to slow down as often as I can, to check in with myself, check in
Mm-hmm.
with where I am, get the support when I need it, get a coach when I need it, get upskilling when I need it, get training when I need it. Take those little actions that would continue to push me
Mm-hmm.
towards that big vision. So for
Yeah.
me, that is what pivoting has looked like.
Yeah, I love that. I think about the fact that I did have the flexibility to do the big pivot. And so often that's just not possible, because of the other commitments we have, because of financial resources, whatever those constraints are. I had the opportunity to do the big pivot, but sometimes that's just not possible. And you have to make the smaller incremental changes. And sometimes the small pivots add up to the big ones. So
Yeah.
I think that is also a really big full takeaway for sure. Ravine, what did your pivot journey look like?
And I just also want to point out that mine is similar to Emma's in the sense
Mm.
that it's a lot of incremental events and interactions that really contributed to my journey. And as I was reflecting on it, starting point of it was actually at about 8 years old. My parents decided to go back to school together and get a bachelor's degree. And during the afternoons, after they picked me up from school, I would go with them to their evening classes. And I have this vivid memory of being in a sociology class and learning about psychology for the first time. And I don't know if you can picture this, but an 8-year-old in a class with probably 20 to 40 some people who are all 30 years old and above, and just listening to all of these topics related to psychology, being completely fascinated and mesmerized by it and thinking, that's what I'm going to be when I grow up. I want to be a psychologist. And so over the years, that morphed into me wanting to be a therapist. And so when I finished high school, it was really easy to decide to pursue a bachelor's degree in psychology, to learn more about it, and then plan was to transition from there to either clinical psychology or counseling psych. And once I wrapped up my bachelor's program, still really fired up about that, I realized I was also interested in lecturing and teaching, which was interesting for me because it wasn't on my radar previously. So I decided to pursue a diploma in adult education and training, and also get a master's in counseling and consulting psychology simultaneously, which was as fun and as challenging as it sounds to balance two programs at the same time. And in the midst of that, I also got the opportunity to start lecturing. So suddenly I was doing all of the things I was really curious about and finding interesting ways to balance that with actually having a life outside school. And so what stood out to me about my journey in particular is that pivot was more so pausing and thinking through, what am I actually feeling right now? Is it just mild curiosity about this, or am I actually passionate about something? For example, with lecturing, I had a professor, that's Mr. Pine. He was just so engaging in the classroom. He shared a lot of personal stories and really helped us to connect with whatever he was talking about that day. And I thought to myself, I'm really inspired by this person. I think one day I might want to lecture. And so I decided I'm going to take this opportunity to go do this teaching diploma, even if I don't end up lecturing full time in the future. And so that became a pivot for me from just being a therapist to now being a therapist and a lecturer. And I remember having another, just a random conversation with the head of the university at the time. And this was the International University of the Caribbean, which is the same university that Makesha was talking about in her story. And she ran into me and said, why don't you sign up for this dual master's program? I know you're interested in counseling psychology, but consulting is really interesting. And it's not going to lengthen the program. You'll be doing some additional courses, but I'm sure you'll still find it fascinating. And I ended up doing that. And it was during that program that I met Makesha. She was actually my first lecturer for my very first course, and she saw something really special in me and told me about the traineeship program at DRI, which was and still is pretty competitive. At that point, 1 in every 5 or 6 applicants was actually invited to the traineeship. And I got invited to it and fell in love with consulting. And so I already had 3 career paths at that point: consulting psychologist, potentially counseling psychologist, and also a lecturer. And by the time I got towards the end of my program, I needed to actually do a practicum for the counseling aspect of it. And I got to intern as a clinical psychologist, intern, and actually provide therapy to children and other clients, and realized that I really enjoyed the work, but I didn't find it as gratifying as consulting. So the pivot in my mind was now, well, I've learned all of these counseling skills along the way. How do I transition those to consulting? What's transferable there? And how can I leverage this on a daily basis so I don't lose it and it's not all for naught? So that was another transition essentially. And then once I wrapped up that program, I started thinking through, well, what's next? And during that period, Makesha and I transitioned into being business partners and co-owners of DRI. And I also decided to pursue a PhD in general psychology with Grand Canyon University. And like Amang, I'm in the dissertation phase. So I'm wrapping up chapters 4 and 5 now, and just super excited to gotten this opportunity to learn more about how university administrative managers resolve workplace conflict, especially as I provide coaching to them and support on a regular basis. It's great to have that deeper insight and lens into their world and to learn about the different tools and resources they're using and how they're supporting each other and their own pivot journeys. So that is my pivot journey. And I'm sure that there will be many, many more pivots along the way.
Absolutely.
And I view it as more of an approach to curiosity and an openness, as opposed to something that would be negative or doing away with what you've accomplished so far and starting over. So it's not about reinventing the wheel, but more so building on the foundation that you already have.
Awesome. That's a wonderful story. I think one of the key takeaways I heard was there isn't necessarily a pain point that drives the pivot. Sometimes it is incremental. For some of us, it is a challenge. It is that feeling of stress, distress, misalignment. And for, in some cases like yours, it's really leaning into that curiosity and taking hold of opportunities. Because I think that's something that I really celebrate about you. You actually saw doors opening, and rather than saying, I'm going to just stay right here, you thought, oh, I'm actually going to step into this. I'm going to be curious. I'm going to see how this could potentially work. So yeah, I love this conversation and the different perspectives
Yeah.
on pivot.
Yep. And as we all share, one word coming to my mind is risk,
Yes. Yeah.
right? Because you cannot pivot and grow if you're not willing to take the risk, if you're not willing
Absolutely.
to step into the discomfort. Because it's change, and change will bring a lot of discomfort, a lot of it, and a lot of self-doubt, and a lot of all the thought traps you can think about, right? But being able to go like, hey, it's uncomfortable, but I'm still willing to step into it. And that's what I'm hearing in all the three stories we've all shared, that we were
Yeah.
in the comfort zones. We could have stayed there, right? But we still took the risk, right? So
Yep.
being willing to step into it and take that risk, even in the midst of all the uncertainty and the fear and the confusion of what is it even going to look like if I do?
Hmm.
Also, what's it going to look like if you do nothing? Either way, there's going to be,
Exactly.
and will you still sit here and suffer and continue to have the discomfort, or would you rather take a step and see where it takes you?
Yeah. And we like to say at DRI as well that change is grief, because
Yeah.
in order to step into something new, you have to let go of your comfort zone. You have to let go of the things that have become routine and habitual and have held you where you are. And that is risky and it's scary. And it can also evoke emotions of loss. And so just recognizing all of that in that journey, that it's not just a cognitive journey, it's not just logical, but it also engages those feelings, it engages fear, and all of that's normal. And it's something that we help persons negotiate all the time in the work that we do. And this is why having that community is so important, because we recognize that this process, it does require a lot. It does require stepping out of that comfort zone and taking risk and engaging with that grief and
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that it may not work out how we think either. But even stepping out and potentially not quite getting to exactly where we envisioned is not necessarily a bad thing. The big part is creating that space where the dreaming can happen.
I was going to say sometimes the success is having the courage to even be on the journey. That
Mm,
is the win in itself. At DRI, we champion celebrating wins,
yeah,
regardless of whether they're smaller or larger, just waiting until you have that mountaintop moment. So embrace the now, essentially.
absolutely. So we do have a couple of information sessions coming up, and these sessions are an opportunity to consider stepping into the Ascend Leadership Pivot Program, which is a program that we have designed together, bringing all of our experiences, our stories, our qualifications, our skill to create a holistic approach to discerning the need for that pivot, whether it's a small pivot or a big one, figuring out and exploring what might that pivot look like and identifying that pathway. So finding that alignment and that direction and that clarity. And these information sessions, we'll put the details in the description below, allow you that space to ask questions, to wonder if this is a good fit for you. And we also promise that it will be a space where we bring value, where you actually learn something that's helpful. And one of the things that we are making available is the Pivot Readiness tool. And we'll provide a link to that in the description as well. And that's a tool that you can use to help you figure out whether the timing is right for you, whether the program is right for you, whether you are ready to take that step and to pivot. And so check out that resource and come to the information session. It will cost you nothing, and you can definitely start that journey of learning and being curious. All right.